the same.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very thankful to be
Oh,
here today. I'm a few minutes late. I'm Tanya Smith. I serve as the Assistant Chair for
it
Educator
went up a little
for
bit.
the donation that we received from Capital.
Yeah.
I loved hearing Christine's background. I came in at UNC where I had a couple times over, but I'm a geographer at heart, and then so I was a social studies teacher, and then came in a little bit late. I didn't figure out that education was my calling until a little bit later, and so just thankful for some opportunities that I've had through my preparation, my work at East Carolina, to be here and be a part of this work. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Diana. Thomas.
Good afternoon. I am Assistant Superintendent of the Resources of Both County Schools. Prior to that, I was Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction in education for about 28 years now, and I too serve as a teacher assistant and have done just about everything. Worked at the Department of Public Instruction for a little while, and I'm passionate really about teachers, so excited to be part of this.
Wonderful. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Coltrane. Jeffrey, are you there? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, come back around. Lisa Eads.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Eads. I'm with the North Carolina Community College System Office. I'm Associate Vice President of Programs, representing the 58 colleges in our system. And I've really enjoyed hearing everybody's background, realizing how long we've all been doing this work. I started out early childhood in the BK licensed world some 25 years ago, and this is my 21st year with our community college system. So very excited to be part of the teacher preparation, and of course my background and contribution will be transfer.
Great, thank you. Lydia Hedrick. Lydia, you with us? Okay, we'll keep moving. I have a, next, I've got a Megan. I know there's a Megan Comstock, but then there's another Megan, but I don't have a last name. I don't have my list in front of me.
Hi there, sorry, this is Megan Bourne. I'm from the Southern Regional Education Board. I'm not technically a member of the subcommittee, but it was invited to listen in as our organization hosted the North Carolina Education Human Capital Roundtable. So we're just excited to listen in to see how this work progresses in the state, and happy to help in any way with research or other things that you all need.
Well, thanks so much for being here, and thanks to the work of your group. It's been really important and influential on what we're trying to do. Now, Megan Comstock.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Comstock. I am also here as an observer and a support person. So I am a doctoral student at the University of Pennsylvania and a current fellow with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So I'm supporting Dr. Evans and Dr. Chamberlain with kind of the back end things so that this runs smoothly for you all.
Great. Glad to have you here. And Tanya Smith.
Hello, I'm Tanya Smith. I am a vocal music educator at Elkin City Schools, grades 7 through 12, also general music teacher at our middle school. I've been teaching around 25 years. It'll be 25 years this summer. And I've also been a mentor teacher for beginning teachers for the past 7 years. So it's near and dear to my heart to keep excellent educators, and our turnover in the music field seems to be pretty high. So I am hoping that we can come up with some great solutions for recruitment and for preparation and for making these young teachers or teachers of any age coming into education for the first time want to stay and feel passionate about public education in the state of North Carolina.
That's great. Wonderful. And I think I missed one that popped on a while. Was that Mr. Jackson? Is here.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Jackson, and I am the Superintendent of Vance County Schools. My background is, this is my 31st year, but I have I started, believe it or not, as a building custodian. And so I've done all that kind of work throughout the time. So I'm looking forward. My journey has demonstrated there's nothing more important than the person who stands in front of children. So I'm looking forward to the work that we complete here, as well as the new ground that we plow here around this whole notion of recruitment, retention, reward, recognition of teachers. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well said. Thanks, Dr. Jackson. Is there anybody that I missed along the way that's on now? I think I missed Sharice Hollingsworth as we were going through. Okay, well maybe we can catch them at another time. But thank you all. I mean, the wealth of experience and passion for education in this group, I think it's really going to drive us to do some great work together. So thank you again for being a part of this. I guess you could read mine and Van's bios there. I guess shortly we should say I'm Dean of the College of Education and Human Services at Lenore Ryan University. I've been here for 10 years. Before that, I was at UNC Wilmington as an associate dean, and then I taught college in Oregon for 5 years at Willamette University, and before that, for about 10 years, I was a special education teacher for students with emotional and behavioral disabilities. Van, I'll turn it over to you. You're muted. I think there you go. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Van Dempsey. I have the honor of serving as the Dean of the Watson College of Education at UNC Wilmington. I started my education journey as a social studies teacher in Chatham County and in Cumberland County when I first started my career. And when I finished graduate school, I went off to West Virginia, where I thought I'd be for 5 or 6 years, and spent 24 years at 2 universities in West Virginia. And then 6 years had the opportunity to come back home to North Carolina, and I've been serving as the dean at UNCW since then. And it's an honor to, number one, be part of the committee and to co-chair with Hank, but to be involved in this work with this group of people is just fantastic.
Great. So we had some guiding principles for our work. Van's going to take us into the actual topic of today, but our guiding principles are: does your idea have impact on students? So everything that we talk about, is there a measurable outcome? Is there an impact that it's going to have on the students, and a positive impact, obviously? And again, is it measurable in an authentic setting in the presence of students and their learning? What we know from the legislature is that they want to see proposals come forward that have some kind of outcome attached to it, so that it's measurable and that they can report on it, we can report on it, and that they are willing to fund it. And my guess is, although it's another subcommittee's work, is that we're going to be asking for quite a bit in terms of funding. So it's important that what we propose is measurable in some way that they're find acceptable. Do the next one, Kim. Okay.
Well, we ready to roll?
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you, Hank, for starting off the meeting and the introductions and framing for us getting to this point. So this begins the focus of the preparation and entry subcommittee, and the essence of the work that we're going to do together. Kim, if you could, or whoever's running the PowerPoint, if you could jump ahead to the pathway visual, I think it's the next one. If I could start here and then come back to the previous slide. Basically, if you keep this visual in mind or in hand, if need be, we're basically talking about preparation and entry within the context of this pathway. And it's important to, as we talked about, Hank and I talked in the planning meeting for this meeting, that blue vertical line that you see there in the right center of the chart is an important demarcation in terms of things that are oriented more toward entry and components that are oriented more toward after what happens after entry into the profession, but we don't see it as a break point. We see it as a transition point. And that number one, we want to make sure we keep in mind the holistic importance of the way this pathway is laid out. We are focusing primarily on the first four columns. That's where most of our work is going to be, but we want to make sure we stay connected to the entirety and the holistic perspective that we see here. So, Kim, if you could go back to the questions. There we go. So we have these 5 questions that are giving us the guidance and the direction for our subcommittee's work. And I'll just go through these very quickly. Number one, what are the requirements for entering the profession for various entry points in the system? And those are the entry points that are in that visual that we just looked at. What is the role of the EPP in supporting early career teachers regardless of the pathway they're on? What is the role of the LEA in supporting early career teachers regardless of the pathway? How would the beginning teacher support team need to be modified to support the new license that may result from this work? And then how would the EPP accountability model need to be modified to support the new licensure system that we might create? So those are the 5 questions that frame out our work. As we've talked about strategy leading up to this meeting, we came to the conclusion that we could work as a committee of the whole on question number 1. And that would give the entire committee a sense of all of the moving parts and all of the components and pieces of the way we're approaching our particular analysis of this work. And so we would all share a knowledge base around the meaning of that question and what its implications are for the work. And then in questions 2, 3, and 4, we could work in breakout groups, subgroups of the whole, as we approach those 3 questions, in part as a way to manage the work, to make sure we're able to accomplish things that we need to accomplish as a subcommittee, but also in part because people may bring particular interests, particular role responsibilities to be able to speak to those 3 different components, the EPP component, the LEA component, the beginning teachers, that we may be able to either bring perspective or bring actual, working knowledge from our roles into those particular components. But we would do those 3 in subgroups, but bring it back together as a committee of the whole for the entire subcommittee. And then the 5th question, the accountability model, we would also look at that one holistically. We would do the work of that particular question as a committee of the whole, having had built knowledge base and built the analyses that we would work through on the first 4 questions. And so we would begin as a committee of the whole and bring the work back together at the end as a committee of the whole. So that those are our 5 questions, and Hank and I and the folks at DPI, Kim and Tom and Andrew, have come to that as a way of approaching the work that we need to do. So I'll pause there, see if folks have questions before I go to the next step. Yes, and Kim, please make sure to put questions in the chat if you have them. So Kim, if you could go to the next slide. So in planning and discussion to, number one, initiate the work, and number two, to begin to capture the elements of the work that we're going to do and what some of the results of that work might be, we thought about this as a way to frame the initial steps around question one. What should the requirements for the entry points in the proposed system be? So what you see in the far left column, if you go back to the visual, is you're seeing the actual entry points that are articulated in the recommendations for the pathway. So as you move from top to bottom, you're seeing down to the advanced teacher adult leadership row, you're seeing actual components of the pathways. The out-of-state teachers entering North Carolina is a way people can come into those particular different places in the pathway. The second column are the current requirements, if we have them in the state of North Carolina, for people who are entering into one of those access points that's articulated in the pathway visual. So if you, in the license 2, license 3 rows, for example, what you see in the second column are the different components that exist within policy for those particular access points in the current, as stated in current policy in North Carolina. The third column, which is the fuller work of the committee unpacking the question, is what are the requirements that we would need to determine, assuming each one of those prescribed entry points is in play. So for example, if learning permit and apprentice teacher, as it's articulated in the model, were actualized, what would we as a subcommittee want to see as requirements for that particular entry point in the model? So that's what we're fleshing out in the third column. And then the fourth one, as we were thinking through this, we started to come up with examples and particular things that we know from the state of the profession in North Carolina. But what about a particular condition, licensure, credential components that a person may hold that might butt up against either the intent of the prescribed entry points or the core current related requirements that might exist in policy. So you see two examples down in the bottom right corner. What if a person comes in from out of state and the teacher has, as part of their record of accomplishment, longevity issues, they have 20 years in another state, they have effectiveness data from a state outside of North Carolina, they bring advanced degrees that were recognized in other places. So how would those kinds of conditions, if they're not specifically articulated in the entry points or in the first three columns, how would we unpack those in terms of the meaning for how a person could transition into the profession in North Carolina, given what we're trying to put together with the recommended entry points? So let me pause there, and Hank and Kim and Tom and Andrew, if you're on, add anything to what I just said in terms of trying to get a frame around this.
No, I don't have anything. I think you've done a great job in kind of outlining what the work is.
And I think we are, if we haven't already, we're going to provide people with did we decide we're going to provide people with the relevant policy documents that may pertain to the second column? Am I correct on that, Kim?
Yes, that's right.
So we're going to get those policy documents, make sure you have those at your disposal as we're doing the work. So if it may be, well, let me stop there for a second and see if folks on the committee have questions or thoughts.
This is Jennifer Russell. I think we need to be incredibly cognizant of making the path for out-of-state teachers a little easier. Because there was a time when they had to retake all their testing, and I think that's a little bit much to ask. And also to take into account if a teacher's been not working for a while and then they move and come here and want to teach, they may not have teacher effectiveness data that's current. So, you know, and coming from Illinois, teacher effectiveness data comes in at a different time. Like, still in Illinois, their tests don't come in until the following year. So that teacher effectiveness data is like delayed. So, just some things to think about.
Following up on that, I probably heard more when I was chair of the state board. I probably heard that concern more than any other single woman. Non-educators in particular not being able to understand why we put so many requirements on successful teachers from other states. So I hope we can address that effectively. And I know there have been changes made in recent years, but and that may be enough. I'm not knowledgeable about it.
I mean, just as a point of reference, I have 3 degrees in education and have been teaching forever, but I can't renew my license because I don't have teacher effectiveness data because I left the profession in 2003. So they didn't have that data then, and I can't get it. And I can't renew my license unless I take the testing, which I think is insulting, honestly. But so there's a problem right there, and I'm sure there's a lot of other higher ed people who are in the same situation. So, because if you left the profession before they started collecting teacher effectiveness data, you know, and before they were posting it online, you can't gather that data. I mean, I had it, but I can't gather it because it wasn't public information at that time. So anyway, there's a lot of issues with that I think we need to unpack a little bit.
Ben, this is Jeff Coltrane from the governor's office. I think this is a good conversation, and I'm thinking this out-of-state challenge actually is similar to the challenge we're going to have to face whenever we think about where we place teachers who are currently licensed on this schedule as well, because some of the same issues around effectiveness data may pertain to those teachers as well, particularly teachers where, you know, either are not teaching EOC or EOG classes currently, or where whatever effectiveness measures we come up with for the future, that data might not exist for the past. And so I think there's a similar dynamic there that we'll have to wrestle with, is not just out-of-state teachers, but also currently licensed teachers and how they're going to fit on this pathway moving forward.
And along those same lines, thinking about, and I don't know if this is a topic for the entry group, but for teachers that leave the profession for a period of time and want to re-enter into the profession, and having those gaps. And I think this kind of gets at Jennifer, so that's Jennifer's question, because I'm not sure if that's necessarily something for the entry pathway or for the one of the other subgroups or subcommittees to tackle.
I just think we're currently very unfriendly to out-of-state teachers, and with our current state of the situation, we need to find a way to be more friendly to out-of-state teachers to come in, and especially if they've taken time off teaching and they don't necessarily have that data, to make them retake all the tests or whatever is just an insert. You know what I mean? It's just not. I think it's unprofessional. You know, they took their tests in their other state, they were licensed, they taught. That should be enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, all states have rigorous standards and we shouldn't be having them retest. So.
I have a quick question, if I may. This is Tanya Smith. I am curious as to how the committee feels about beginning teachers who are in the classroom, they're, you know, provisional, and they're struggling to pass that praxis, but yet they are excellent educators. I'm making sure that I'm hearing this correctly, that we're looking at another pathway for them to become fully licensed as well as addressing this kind of goes along with the out-of-state issue, I think, maybe. I don't know.
Tanya, I'll take a chance at that, and then Tom will hopefully you'll clean up my answer. Part of the dynamic of the recommendations is to move away from the input components. And I think what you just asked would fall within the inputs. And what we're doing is looking for evidence of effectiveness. Tom, did I capture that?
Yeah, I think so. That is one thing we're trying to, in some ways, results on a licensure exam may be an outcome of interest, but it certainly is problematic in that we know that many effective teachers are not successful in passing that licensure exam, though in the 3+ years that they're working in the profession, they're showing effectiveness on other measures. So yes, the attempt here is to try to address that, and how can we leverage other ways to determine that a teacher has the skill and competency necessary to hold the license. The other question you asked is, are we building out that separate pathway? So I would argue that it's not really a separate pathway. It's expanding our notion of what it takes to for a teacher to demonstrate their skill or competency on the things that we care about. And right now that's listed as content, broadly as content and pedagogy. So are there other ways to measure that? Now, technically, the determination of what that menu of options is, that resides in the work of the licensure subcommittee. So this committee is really about, so it might be helpful to think, at least initially, we're talking about content and pedagogy here. How does that configuration place the teacher appropriately on the license levels? So, and then what does preparation look like, given that you are going to have a menu of options for demonstrating your effectiveness? So how does preparation, and I'm not talking about IHE preparation, I'm talking about all preparation, how does it need to expand our notions of preparation if we're going to have multiple ways for teachers to demonstrate their effectiveness? So it may not be simply preparing teachers to take a praxis exam. It could be preparing teachers to go through a series of micro-credentials that establishes that effectiveness, or some other type of measure. But those things, the work of what all those options are is in the licensure committee. And yours is more about how we adequately prepare them and place them in this model once they're ready to enter the teaching force.
So I'm on another committee as well that's meeting tomorrow, and I was invited to this one, and I'm attending because I really want to understand all of the pieces and how they fit together so that we can do the best work for educators and for students possible. And thank you so much for that answer, because I'm currently working with a teacher that takes it to praxis, and I'm talking, this teacher is an amazing educator. This person has taken the practice like 3 times and cannot pass. And my heart is breaking. So, and every time they take it, they get more and more discouraged. So I'm loving to hear this conversation about opportunities to go in different ways. I love that.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. And Diana's question that's in the chat, I think sort of has a foot in both worlds, because I'm looking at Diana's question: could related requirements for teachers on emergency licenses or permits to teach be added to the chart? In my feeling about that is yes. It's sort of we add another row and we have that below out of state, but I'm looking back over at the visual that I think in some ways teachers, as Diana described it, sit in that license, what is currently licensed to. They are in the field, but they have, there are potential preparation issues to be addressed, which is, go ahead.
Yeah, so, my thought on and again, this is just my reaction to the question. This is not trying to tell you what this is. I would not see the need for an emergency or a permit to teach under this model, because a teacher who's coming to you with a bachelor's degree and that's it, and maybe doesn't have enough content in the coursework to qualify for what we envision now as the residency license. That teacher would probably go in license 1, because we're articulating here that this is a teacher who's coming with the bare minimum, which is a bachelor's degree, and hasn't demonstrated any skill of the 2 skills that we're looking for advancement. So how does that teacher fit into that? And this is a great question for you as the entry folks. Is there, when this comes to how long can they sit in that license 1? Well, that could be different for different teachers. Like if you do come into a license 1 with sufficient content, let's say I'm a math major coming to teach in math. How long can I sit in license 1 in order to demonstrate my content or pedagogy to move to a license 2? Well, that might be, you might decide that that's 3 years for that teacher. But a teacher comes to you with a general bachelor's degree. I want to be a social studies teacher, but I've got 4 hours of social studies content on my transcript or whatever they might have. Does that teacher get longer to acquire the courses or the skills to demonstrate that they have mastery over the content? That is totally in the purview of this subcommittee to make those determinations about what this person has to do, why we're putting them in this bucket, what the length of time is to demonstrate those competencies for those buckets. That is all your work. So I don't want you to see it as there are predetermined notions. And so to Diana's question, I could see a case where you say, if you don't have sufficient content hours to be a license 1 under our rules, then that would put you in the learning permit, even though you have a bachelor's degree. So those are all possible ways to build this out, and you guys have got to figure that out for all the different scenarios that might exist.
Yeah, Kim, are you trying to capture notes? I'm trying to jot things down as well.
Yes, I'm taking active note.
Okay, because this sounds like this could land in both a new row across the bottom, but also a note that's up in the license 1. But what about? So, but Diana, did you have any follow-up questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate Todd popping in. I want to make sure that for those folks who are on the call who don't work in that aspect of licensure, have access to the documents from DPI and elsewhere to be able to become better informed about that as we create the recommendations from the subcommittee.
regardless of the subject area they're teaching.
Thank you.
I want to pick back up on Christina's question earlier, and then Ashley's that Ashley you just put in the chat, and go back to the comment I made about the vertical blue line. That's not a chasm between the two sides; it's a transition point. And so the committee, the purview of the committee is within preparation and entry. So we are providing perspective and expertise and input to the process of what are we looking for at each, the components of preparation, but also the points of entry. If you're going to enter at this point, what are we expecting to see? And I think to the question about can you jump from license 1 to license 4, you're not absolved from the essence of 2 and 3. The assumption is you are providing evidence of having met that, although you might not necessarily stop in 2, 4. You don't necessarily move in progression that way. And then the question about the preparation is that entry, that first quote entry point to the left of to the right of the blue line is where it's expert teacher. What would we expect to see when a person arrives at that point? So it can be an entry point and it could be part of a progression, depending on where they might have started the process earlier, where they may have joined the profession earlier.
Then I think it's also fair to say that this subcommittee, if they feel like they want to propose an additional entry point or change the entry points, then we have the purview to consider that as well.
I think so.
Yes, you have a thought about how this could work, but really what it is totally yours to create.
And so I would be remiss if I didn't just interject kind of a rural context here. Can you put that back up, please? Thank you. And maybe I'm reading this wrong. From co-teacher all the way to license 3, the assumption then is that there's some level of oversight by an expert teacher or above. In districts like mine, where I may not have a certified math teacher, tell me how that works. Because I think you're going to have to take into consideration there are a lot of districts where across districts, a lot of rural districts where you may not have a fully licensed math teacher, secondary level. That's real world. And so how then do if they have to be under the supervision of a licensed 4 teacher and I have no licensed 4 teachers, what does that look like?
So, Dr. Jackson, I am in no way trying to be cute with my response to you, but that is exactly what you have to tell us. What does that look like? Because we know. So we're relying on the research that tells us the best way for a teacher to become an effective teacher is to have some tutelage or mentoring with an effective teacher. So we're trying not to discount that research, but I've done the math on this, and I presented to the board. I think you recall back when the legislature came out with every teacher who's a mentor teacher has to be rated at the accomplished or higher. And I did the analysis and said, look, here are 5 districts that will not have a mentor teacher, and you're punishing them for evaluating their teachers appropriately. So we've got to solve this problem, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I do know that part of this model is to provide dedicated resources to this teacher for having those things. So could we create a situation where that teacher, if there is no qualified mentor available for that teacher could potentially use those funds in some way to work with another teacher? I don't know. I'm hypothesizing here, but you know, we've got to try to find a way to ensure that these folks are paired with somebody that's going to help them grow during this formative period. And if we don't, we do so to our own detriment.
And Tom, to connect back to a couple of previous questions and points, if a person enters at license 1, the assumption as they move forward in professional experience and time is they will have, to use an existing term, they will have affiliated with a source of professional support and expertise such that they will have been able to ensure the content knowledge and the pedagogy knowledge to engage in practice that leads to their ability to demonstrate effectiveness.
Yes.
And back to the earlier question, and one of the affiliations could be with a college or university program, but it could be with other potential affiliations, such that it culminates in the ability for license 4.
That is correct.
Right, and so in the language in like license 1, license 2, where it talks about advanced teacher mentor, it really is, they are affiliating with an entity that could be literally professionals, or it could be some kind of organization or institution that is providing that support for them to be able to gain the knowledge, skills, and abilities to exhibit that effectiveness.
That is definitely a possibility. And then, so I also want to point out the advanced teacher roles. So for these roles, what we're hoping is designing from our budget and compensation folks, they need to establish how these advanced teaching roles are going to be leveraged by a district. So we don't know yet, is this an ADM allotment to a district saying, all right, Dr. Jackson, you have, based on your ADM, you've got 20 advanced teaching roles. And then that allows you, I mean, our hope is that those are attractive enough positions that you will get that fully licensed math teacher who's highly effective, agreeing to come to your district, and you would have the ability to leverage that person as the mentor for all your early career teachers that need that mentor. So that's one possible solution to this. But, you know, again, how we construct this, I think you're raising a great point, is we have to recognize that there's going to be differing levels of capacity across all the districts, and how do we help support that in this model rather than turning a blind eye to the fact that there are plenty of districts out there that don't have fully licensed math teachers. How do we help? And I think things like, so Van, I'm with you, things like the, what is it called, the new teacher support program?
Right.
That certainly is an entity that could serve that capacity, and presumably that teacher would have funds in this professional advancement account to engage in that. So the district's not scrambling to find money. That money is coming with that new teacher that you're hiring.
This is Jennifer Russell. One of the things that, from the moment I saw this, I was most concerned with was the complexity of it. You know, 4 different levels before they're fully licensed. You know, the advanced stuff isn't as bad, I don't think, but the steps to get to licensure are fully licensed. And just with my experience with dealing with the school districts and residency licensure has been very difficult and very time consuming. And there is a true lack of understanding of what residency licensure really is. And trying to communicate that to the school districts and the candidates at the same time is exhausting. Like, I spend hours a week dealing with residency candidates, so I'm very concerned about all of this and who's going to be the communicator to communicate all these different things, because then when we as an EPP tell them something they don't like they don't have the right degree, or they don't have a 2.7 GPA, or they need to take a science class, then they get very upset with us. And it gets, the LEA gets upset with us, the candidate gets upset with us, and to me this is just multiple layers of complexity that I don't know how we would simplify. I don't know if anyone else has that concern.
This is Tom. That's a little surprising of a comment for me to hear, because I feel like the current system is so complex that it takes me 5 PowerPoint slides and a flowchart model to get anybody to understand, even have a fundamental grasp of the process. So, I hear what you're saying, but I think one of the major responses to this, and one of the reasons that I was so excited to be a part of the Human Capital Roundtable, is the unnecessary complexity of our current model. This tries to make it very clear to folks, you have here you are, here's what you need to do to advance to the next step. And it's very clearly articulated. It's you have to master your content. All right? So here's what that looks like. Let's go do it. Or to the next one, okay, you did that one, this is the other one, and here's the requirement. Whereas what we're doing now is people enter the profession, we're throwing them into this kind of 3-year window and saying, here's a laundry list of things that you've got to get done and you got to do, we'll see you in 3 years. And that's what we're trying to solve here, is it may look complex, but it's actually scaffolded to say, here's what we expect of you next. We're not throwing the kitchen sink at you and saying, good luck with that. We're really teeing this up to say, this is what we see you have, this is what it's going to take you to get to the next level. And with that comes a recognition of your greater skill and an increase in salary.
So this is Lydia Hedrick from Davidson County. I think the biggest issue that we have seen in licensure in our district is that expectations are coming from different areas. So there are EPP expectations, there are beginning teacher expectations. If you're a CTE teacher, there are CTE expectations. If you're a residency license, there are additional induction expectations. And that is the complexity that I see that really confuses people, because they feel like they're being told different things by different areas, but it's just because everyone's looking at it through a different lens. And so if we could streamline that, where everything is coming from one centralized location, I think that would simplify things. But I do agree, even if the goal of this chart is to be less complex, it is still multi-step and going to be confusing for folks.
This is Tom. I don't disagree with that. So, but my response to that is, so let's build this so where it looks the same for everybody, regardless of their pathway, and there are not different requirements, dependent on whether you enroll in an APP on a Thursday instead of a Monday, and all these different little conditions that seem to be inserted into the current model. Let's lay this out and make it as straightforward as possible so that everybody knows this is where I am, this is what's required of me to get to the next step. And it's not dependent on whether I went to an EPP, traditional program, licensure only, or if I did a residency model, or if I came from out of state. It's all the same. It all looks exactly the same with clear expectations and multiple opportunities to demonstrate those competencies to get you to the next level.
Yeah, I think this, number one, I think this conversation is absolutely essential because we're getting our heads around the work. Two important, along with, I'm taking notes as fast as I can, along with Kim. In the requirements to be determined, one component of this is it isn't just about the outcome. It isn't just about at some point in the future you will show us your ability to generate effectiveness, and then you'll be on your way. There've got to be some ways that we benchmark on the way there. How do we know the person is building the skills and the ability to be able to do that? So number one, this paired with an advanced teacher mentor may be a critical component. There's also making sure you are connected to the professional resources, institutions, whatever that may be. Back to the question from the superintendent about math teachers, you are connected and you are collaborating with agencies and entities that can help you build that knowledge base, and that there is a standard of practice component on the way to having that effect on learners. You've got to show us you're meeting some standards of practice that get you there. So it's along with that, I think what's misleading is that arc across the top can jump to professional level by demonstrating effectiveness if you're able to demonstrate mastery of content and pedagogy by the time you arrive at that point. So it isn't just a leap of faith that one day you'll be able to have an impact on learners. It's that built into this, but it's not explicit enough, is you are expected to demonstrate mastery of content and mastery of pedagogy as you are moving toward license 4.
And Van, I think that's a good point, because I think, the previous question about the different kind of requirements, right, from, CTE and from programs and then from DPI. And I think that's where EPP, speaking from an EPP perspective, we've tried to put in some gateways, because now we have punitive measures against us if we do put out candidates that are not meeting that expectation with the sanctions model. And so we put in gateways along the way that add kind of additional program requirements, because we want to see our candidates demonstrating those checkpoints along the way before we put them fully out. And so I think that may be also kind of missing from this conversation is, yes, EPP programs have additional requirements in there, because there's this other model that's sitting over here that I'm not saying is good or bad or indifferent. I'm just saying there is another model that puts that that high stakes accountability on EPPs and the people that we are putting out.
Right. But I think to the work of the subcommittee, what we are charged to do is articulate that language in the entry points. So, for instance, someone who enters under licensure 2, what evidence are we going to be looking for that they can demonstrate mastery of content? They can either do mastery or content, and we can actually change that. We can say some elements of mastery and content, and that becomes more advanced in order to get to license 3. And it's a little bit, I don't know if this came up in the roundtable work, it's a little bit loosely the medical model. It's not, we'd have to change the way we use the word resident, intern, and that kind of thing. But, we would not take a person who's in the initial stages of their medical profession and preparation and turn them loose on patients and say, hey, if they come out alive at the end of this, you're ready to move on. we're not going to take those kinds of professional risk. And so I think it's a little bit to some of the concerns that is confusing or misleading. Teacher in residency, but with a whole lot of mentoring and support, and they are, what we would now call the teacher of record is really not what they are. If we were literally saying that in the model, we're taking a lot of risks on our way to the ability to demonstrate effectiveness. I think part of our responsibility is making sure we don't expose children to risk as they enter at different stages. Tom, does that?
Yeah. So I think that is correct. So I think if we look at a licensed one teacher and we said, I mean, part of what you're articulating, I think earlier, Van, is absolutely correct. Like within these licenses, let's say we say a licensed one is for a 3-year term. Are there incremental steps that are associated with renewing that license, with maintaining that license over 3 years? So one of the things that we're struggling with our licensure system is right now we're in a situation where we've got teachers in the field who can potentially go for their 8th year of not having met any of the testing requirements to hold the license. That through a series of extensions and with the incorporation of the limited license, we're looking at folks that are 8 years on without having demonstrated any of the competencies that we require of other teachers. So the whole idea of this model is that it should be a continuous improvement model. So even if that goes down into within a license, what does that look like if you're on a 3-year track? What do you need to show us by the end of year 1 to keep that license, or year 2, so that we know you're progressing and it's not just at the end of year 3 you haven't met any of the requirements and you're out. And then then that raises the question of the demonstrated effectiveness. That jump would have to occur. So let's say we did have a teacher, license 1, teaching for 3 years, that's just demonstrating effectiveness, and I don't mean EBOS, I mean on the whole display of effectiveness measures that we have. So in my head, this can't just be about EBOS. So EBOS goes to impact on student learning, but we also, there are other aspects of impacting students in teaching that we would want to see in this model. And hopefully we can build those out. So those skills or that effectiveness should incorporate the whole breadth of what we think it means to be an effective teacher. So if that teacher could hit all those things, that is, they support student learning as measured through assessments, if that's one of the models. But they also support, they inspire students with a love of learning, if that's something we can measure, if they support the social, emotional well-being of students, if that's something we can measure. If that teacher could demonstrate all that effectiveness in License 1 without ever having demonstrated mastery over content and pedagogy, would we prevent them from moving to a License 4? So that's a little different, I think, than the question you asked, Van, which just kind of assumes if they had 3 years of EBOS scores, would we move them to a License 4? To that, I would say no. But it's a different question when you say, if we have a comprehensive model of what it means to impact students, and that teacher that's in a License 1 is able to knock it out of the park on all those measures, would we want to prevent them from moving to a License 4? Which kind of raises the question, are we focused on ensuring that people go through some process in order to be a License 4? or are we focused more on, can that teacher demonstrate that they are promoting learning, broadly defined, and impact on their students? And I think that's a question you guys have to answer. I can't answer it for you. I can see it both ways, but ultimately that is a decision that this group has to make. Like, can that, I don't know specifically if it's in this particular subgroup. We have to think about that, and we'll talk about that, I think, Van later and Hank. But that's a great question that needs an answer to it. But I don't want you to think that jump would occur in a very narrow thing like my students got better test scores for 3 years straight, and we think that's okay. I think it would have to be bigger than that. Does that help, or did I just confuse the issue?
This is Hank. Tom, yeah, I think that's helpful, and I think it raises a really important question that ties back to Aaron's. And I think that's why on our list of questions to consider, the accountability model comes up, because if there are going to be other routes, it's either going to have to be a fair playing field, or we're going to have to adjust the accountability model that we have in place right now moving forward. So, yeah, that will make for great conversation for this subcommittee.
Yeah, and I think that's one of your big questions for this group, right? How does the accountability model have to change? The EPP accountability model have to change?
Right.
I can't see us building an entirely new and different system, and the EPP accountability model remains as it is. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
And Tom, can I ask a clarifying question on the intent of the text that's in the chart we're looking at? Down at the bottom cluster of text in license 1 and license 2 and license 3, it says paired with an advanced teacher mentor. Now, I know what that looks like in license 3 because that's EPPs the way they're currently configured. But is the assumption that in license 1, license 2, license 3, you are in a classroom with an advanced teacher, you're not in your own classroom?
I would interpret that more to be paired in the sense of we pair early career teachers with mentors, not that you're working. I mean, so just to clarify, I could see, if you think about our advanced teaching roles models that are going on across the state, a lot of those models, what they do is they take an advanced teacher and they have 4 or 5 less advanced teachers working with that teacher. So they are under the direct supervision of that advanced teacher. They call it a multi-classroom teacher. So that model could exist, or it could be seen as something a little more generic, like we do, like this is your mentor teacher. But I think what we want to try to avoid is a mentor-teacher relationship where it's like once every 9 weeks I ask you how you're feeling. It needs to be a little more robust than that.
Then that to me is a really important consideration for the committee's work, that if we're looking, for example, in license 1, what are we expecting at the point of entry if it is possible for the teacher in residency to be in his or her classroom? We're looking for something really different than what we're looking for in terms of entry if the person is in a classroom with an advanced teacher. Because we're looking for, I mean, I will tell you, if I were not co-chairing, I was a member of the committee, I would say in license 1, it's not possible for a person to come in license 1 with their own classroom. I mean, that would be professionally irresponsible. Versus, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think what you're saying is so important, and to me there's a very big difference in licensure. I was a high school English teacher. I could see
someone teaching beside me high school English with an English major, she might have a really bumpy year one, but it's going to be okay. Versus someone who has a degree in history walking into a kindergarten classroom all by themselves. It's not just a bumpy year. That to me is irresponsible on our part to let that one happen with no experience, no interest in, like, no knowledge of how to keep reading with the science of reading legislation. Like, I think there may not be a one-size-fits-all solution here at level one.
The truth is, we're already doing that right now. Level one, that license one is a permit to teach.
I know, and that's terrifying.
And we have had to hire in certain hard to staff positions a permit to teach teacher, and it is so difficult. It's so difficult. But because of the needs, it's either put a sub in there who is, or hire that permit to teach person. And it's the LEA's job at that point to ensure that all of those support systems are in place to make sure that that person has some level of success. But it happens every day under our current licensure piece. It's not what we want to do, but sometimes it's what we have to do.
But you're doing that as a matter of an emergency license.
The permit to teach is one step below the emergency license.
Okay, yeah, okay, well that actually, yeah, I'm not casting judgments on the need to do that. What I'm saying is, in that case, we're doing it because we have no other choice.
Absolutely.
In this model, we're saying that we're doing it as an act of intention. And to me, that's the fundamental question. If we had choices, would we do it? No, I don't think so. I think, no, we wouldn't. And so, you know, one thing this does for communication over to other subcommittees is the only way you're going to grow out of that fixed, you know, we're forced to do that because we have no other choice, is you got to do something over in some of the other subcommittees like compensation. You got to build out a model that helps to ensure that doesn't happen. But for this subcommittee, we would want to consider the question in license one, would we think you can enter there and you are the teacher of record in a classroom with your own group of students? And if the answer is yes, then what are we looking for in terms of that person's ability to come in at that point? And if we believe that we can articulate what that is, we articulate it, but we can also say, we don't believe that is professionally responsible to do as the official plan of the state of North Carolina. And therefore, that person can be assigned in a classroom with an advanced teacher, but cannot be in their own classroom. Because if you jump over, and I'm speaking as a dean of an EPP, if you jump over to license 3, we would never do that. We probably have people that before they get to their internship, they would be capable in an emergency situation of taking their own classroom for some of our students, but they don't have a bachelor's degree if they're in our undergraduate programs. Number one, they're not even eligible. And number two, we would see that as something risky. And I'm pretty sure our school districts would say, you know, we'd rather you don't start thinking down that pathway, Dean. Anyway, but that is what the committee is trying to figure out. What does that mean at license 1 if a person enters at that point?
Well, and I think to add to that discussion, you know, our emergency license and our permits to teach right now are time limited. And so the way this is I can live one of those 3 license areas for up to 5 years. And so I think that's a difference as well. And I agree, man. I think thinking about what are those kind of, we know we have emergency situations, but what are those things that we want to make sure, because we do have a responsibility to the children that are in that classroom to make sure that we are getting a person in there. And so what are those checkpoints that are going to be along the way for them to stay in that section?
Is it possible to have some of these licenses only available in certain licensure areas, or does it have to be applied evenly across everything? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, I agree. I think in some circumstances, having the English major in the high school classroom teaching English is not the same as having the, the history major teaching elementary, or I can think of even some, completely out of field kinds of experiences where people just don't have the knowledge base that they would need to do more than just supervise kids, right? So I wonder, do we have any flexibility here to only allow, a certain situation to happen in certain licensure areas? Or does it have to be an across the board application?
I have a question, which I think kind of ties into what you just said, which is, okay, so well, I am mentoring someone that is in my field, which that's extremely key. And, I've been doing it for, it seems like eon, but I also am mentoring an high school English teacher is AP, and she teaches junior English. And so as a mentor, we've been creative, and good pedagogy is good. He was struggling with so I went in and we co-taught a unit on the color purple, and I brought in the Harlem Renaissance. But that was because we said, okay, we're going to co-teach the unit. Mentors, like I said a minute ago, not just, hey, how you feeling, but actually doing the hard work and taking your planning period sometimes and going in and coaching. Is there some way that we could, do those cross-curricular training for mentor teachers where they actually do units with these people? And I don't know, I'm rambling. Do you see where I'm going with that? Does that make sense?
Dan, this is Tom. Do you mind if I jump in real quick on some questions?
Sure.
So that's a great question, Tanya, and I'm going to come back to you on that. Christina, the question you raised, the answer to that question is yes. We have precedent for different license categories having different requirements. If you think of elementary education and ECGC, clearly those, the board has seen fit to distinguish certain rules that are applicable to those areas that are not applicable to other areas. So I would say yes to that. I think my question on that, for the license one is would you see, so if a teacher came out of an ed prep program without having done any demonstration of mastery of content or pedagogy, would you see that person as being able to have their own classroom with support from somebody, or is that any, as opposed to somebody who comes to the classroom with a bachelor's degree, you would not see that? And if that's the distinction you're drawing, that would need to be articulated within that license one. Like, are there differential mentor requirements for a license one who has this set of experiences versus somebody who has a different set of experiences? That does add some complexity to the license one, but I think it should be part of that conversation if that's how you're envisioning it. There was a question that came up about advanced teaching roles that I do want to address. The advanced teaching roles, the idea here it's not that the teachers are coming out of the classroom in any way. The two advanced roles that you see articulated here, classroom excellence, that's the general thinking about that is that you would have an advanced teacher that would have greater impact over student learning. So, you might see a situation where that teacher is allowed to teach 60 kids with, maybe with some licensed one teacher supporting him or her. We're not trying to define what those models are, but you could see a situation where a teacher actually teaches more students than he or she normally would. And then adult leadership, those are highly effective teachers whose role is to impact the learning of other teachers and grow their capacity. So in both cases, the idea, these are roles that are firmly embedded in the classroom. They are not administrative roles. They just think a little differently about how we organize schools and classrooms. So I want to be very clear with the advanced teaching roles that we're not talking about a quasi-administrative role here. We're talking about teachers who are actually instructional leaders and expanding their impact on students across a larger group of students than they currently do. And then the last question from Tanya, those are great questions, and they're driven largely by the capacity of the district. So whether I assign you a mentor teacher who's able to help you with pedagogy or content and that is matched in your licensure area, or just is generally a great teacher, that's going to depend on, I think, where that person is in their license pathway, and it would be a function of the capacity of the district. I don't think we're ever going to build a model that is able to dictate to everybody in every district what this has to look like. I think what the best we can do is create a model where there's opportunity for all districts, regardless of their capacity, to support their early teachers in a better way than they are currently able to now. So I do see that problem, Tanya, and I think it's hard to answer because what that looks like in Wake County is going to look very different than what it looks like in Vance County or Hope County or any of those other counties that surround Wake. And there's just no way around that.
I'm wondering if the license one, the teacher in residency, if one way that we might think about this could be that those licensed one teachers have responsibility for supervising a group of students. So, quote unquote, they have their own group of students, but they're under the leadership or supervision, or I guess under an umbrella of an advanced teacher classroom excellence, under sort of a multi-classroom leader model. So they're not the teacher of record in the same sense that we would consider a teacher of record today. So somebody else is co-planning with them, co-teaching with them, but not in a one-on-one model. So to me, that distinction would be like the learning permit apprentice teacher. That's a one-on-one model. That apprentice teacher is one-on-one in a classroom serving with another teacher. Whereas in the license one, maybe that distinction is there, is one advanced teacher, classroom excellence teacher working with multiple teachers in residency, who are leading a group of students and carrying out instructional activities that have been planned in conjunction with a more experienced teacher. I don't know if that's something that we would consider, and would that be something that would be possible to do across licensure areas? Because I agree with Tom. I think the problem, and I'm the one who raised it, is could we have different rules for different licensure areas? The problem is that then becomes really complex really quickly, and we're trying to simplify. So
Tom and Hank and everybody, I put something out there in the interest of time, because we've got about 20 minutes left. And I'm thinking forward to the next meeting. that in terms of strategy for having the conversation, organizing the conversation, if we could in our next meeting focus on one column at a time, and we might do this breakout group, something like that, but we focus on bringing some specific language to license 1, then license 2, and I'm hearing some things that I think at least we can fix, some pins in the map, and we can move them around, but at least for the sake of conversation, that on license 1, 2, and 3, that one scenario is the person has their own classroom of children. The second scenario is the person is working in a classroom with an experienced teacher in license 1 and 2. And so if we can give people some parameters for framing the discussion that way, what if they were the teacher of record? What if they were with a teacher of record? And then the second one would be, if this were the model, how would we write that entry language for each one of the license levels? And then the next would be, if we were going to alter the model, what would the alterations be? And that way we can, for me, I'm saying this in part for me, because I think now that we've had this discussion, which helps everybody get their heads around the entire span, in our next discussion, could we really zero in on each one of the columns? Or do breakout groups, because we've got about 30 people in the meeting. We could maybe be able to break out. One group takes number 1, one group takes number 2, that kind of thing.
So this is Tom, and I'm not trying to torpedo you, Van, but I am making a plea to our LEA folks to think really hard about what's being said here, because what you've got then is 2 FTEs or FTE and some part of an FTE assigned to one classroom of students. And that is huge. And from a person count, and we really need to think about, you know, that license 1, 2, and 3. I'm not saying at all that doesn't make perfect sense, and it is a great thing for our beginning teachers. That's going to have to be really elevated to the budget and compensation folks. And I do think Jeff Coltrane is with us here.
I am, Tom.
Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that Jeff's going to be really, really helpful for us in taking that back to the budget and compensation folks to say, okay, look, we're going to need, you know, this increases the ADM allotment by school district by a factor of, you know, 0.75 or whatever it is, and how do we model that from a cost perspective? But I am 100%, and I am fully on board with everything we know about the research tells us this is the best way to make these teachers effective and to keep them in the classroom. But I'm also, we have to bump this up against the practicality and the actual capacity of our LEAs.
Tom, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead, and then I want to follow up what Tom said.
Oh, that's okay. And no, I just would agree with what Tom shared. And I had to drop off for another call, so I missed a little bit of this conversation. But I think currently, Tom, and correct me if I'm wrong, license 1 and license 2 right now would be very similar to our current residency or our old lateral entry license, that these are teachers who came into the profession without having gone through a traditional EPP program. And we currently don't have the requirement that they're working with an advanced teacher, but I think it's definitely, the research shows that that's the ideal scenario. But I believe that's currently the way our model is set up. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's okay.
So Tom,
Go ahead, Doctor.
so Tom, I would then say too, and you made the case for scaling the advanced teaching roles very well, because embedded in that is exactly what we're saying, and we're having with those pilots that were run, we actually had to do it with the understanding that we would have to build in the sustainability for it using existing resources. So I think there is a pathway. I just think you might want to take a look at some of that and see where there's some scalability around that work, because I think there's been some good work done in that space with those pilots you guys have pushed, especially here with us, because what you find is that parents are willing to accept a qualified teacher in a larger class versus smaller classes and a questionable teacher in that model.
And Tom and Jeff, I don't intend for this to sound disrespectful for what you just said, but it probably is going to really feel that way. If we're barely out of the gate, and if we're already saying there's no need to think beyond existing resources to do this, we might as well stop right now. And by the way, Jeff, we have a drive task force meeting later today. If we begin the assumption do drive within existing resources, you may as well cancel that meeting this afternoon. Because we're not saying to any other element or aspect or component or facet of this, assume that what is currently the state of the business is going to remain the same, and then go do your work. What I'm suggesting is, particularly in License 1 and License 2, that people who do this work, both in LEAs and in EPPs and at the Department of Education, if we fundamentally believe it is not responsible to take a person at a particular license level in this proposal and put them in a classroom